have to get out of the habit of war. It's, it's more than a habit, it's an addiction. Have to get out of thinking that we must be a military superpower. We must get out of thinking that we must have military bases as we have in 100 countries. Is it possible that having military bases in 100 countries arouses a lot of antagonism? Is it possible that it provokes terrorism when your soldiers and your sailors are all over the world occupying this country and occupying, is it possible? Why do we have to be a military superpower? Why can't it be a humanitarian superpower? Instead of sending planes to bomb, why don't we send planes with food and medicine?
Oh shit, look, it's one of the machines. Looks like it's trapped under something, it's broken or something.
Let's get out of here, we cannot stay.
Hold on a second, let me get my keyboard. I can reprogram this thing.
Doesn't matter, leave
No, seriously, I can do it. Just give me a second.
Unsuccessful.
One more time. No, I swear to God, I can do this, man. I can do this.
Enemy. I kill Zero.
Reprogramming. Unsuccessful.
Enemy. I kill Zero. Enemy.
Reprogramming. Unsuccessful.
Not going through this.
Enemy.
Maybe this will work.
I kill Zero.
You have to work.
Enemy. I kill Zero.
All right, this is the last time.
Enemy.
Reprogramming. Successful.
Yes!
How's everybody doing this evening? Welcome to We've Read the Documents. Tonight's going to be a short video. I'm going to discuss the Glendale Montessori school case that occurred in the 1980s. I'm going to read a brief introduction to the case of itself from the Witch Hunt Narrative, a book by Cheit. Here's the copy of my book. As you can see, it is well read. I've read it at least 2 to 3 times. Yes, all 500 pages of it. It is the basic narrative of the quote-unquote witch hunts that happened between the 80s and early 90s about the daycare schools and the Montessori schools, and about how these were not witch hunts, that at the bare minimum, this narrative is the bare minimum, this book's bare minimum, no conspiracy, that in a majority of these cases, molestations of children did occur. Now, I believe that it was more than that. I believe that a satanic ritual abuse was going on at that time that is connected between Franklin and the Finders and serial killers like John Wayne Gacy and David Berkowitz. And it's all interconnected into one another in this big, massive pedocracy that still continues to this day. But yeah, we're going to read the basic narrative from the Witch Hunt Narrative, and then we're going to read an article about Skip Clemens. And I'm going to talk about why this case is important to me and why I want to continue to research it, as well as a way that you may be able to help me continue researching it. So let us begin. Glendale Montessori. Location, Stuart, Florida. Institution, Glendale Montessori School. Date, 1987. Lead defendant, James Toward. James Toward's name is also on the dedication page of Nathan and Snedeker's book, although the case as well is not actually discussed. It stems from abuse allegations at the Glendale Montessori School in Stuart, Florida, where James Toward was headmaster. The first official record that there might be sexual abuse at the preschool came through the Child Abuse Registry Hotline on June 25, 1987. The call reported a highly sexualized behavior by a 2.5-year-old girl. She laid on top of her mother and started, quote-unquote, pumping her. When her mother asked what she was doing, the little girl said, quote-unquote, screwing. The girl also asked her mother to put her hand in the child's panties and, quote-unquote, make her feel good. When asked if someone did this to her, the girl said, quote-unquote, Mr. T, the name children use for James Toward. The police interviewed these parents, who apparently removed their child from the school. Nothing else happened at this point, even though the case would later be said to have all the markings of a modern-day witch hunt. But the witch hunt narrative has never acknowledged this initial warning sign or the minimal response to it. Another complaint about possible sexual abuse at Glendale Montessori was received on the Child Abuse Registry hotline 2 months later on August the 21st. A police investigator contacted the parents of a 4.5-year-old boy who had quote-unquote feigned illness, screamed, cried, and locked himself into the bathroom to avoid going to school. The parents called the hotline after the son grabbed his father's hand and rubbed it against the boy's genitals. The boy told his mother he learned that from quote-unquote Mr. T. Neither of these early disclosures could possibly have been caused by repetitive interviews or public hysteria. The reports occurred the same day as the observed behavior in the matter had not yet become public. The following day, a search warrant was executed at the home of James Toward. The boy had told authorities he was taken to the Toward's house, where he and several other boys were photographed naked, wearing masks, bandanas, and cowboy hats. The boys said those items would be found in the closet of a spare bedroom. According to the search affidavit, costume masks, bandanas, and cowboy hats were located, quote-unquote, where the child had described. The child was also, quote-unquote, able to describe the entrance to the home, even though Toward told the police he had never taken the children from school to his home. A third complaint pertaining to the Glendale Montessori came on September 11th, 1987, when the Stuart Police Department received a call from a woman in Tennessee who was visiting her mother in Knoxville and had not been in Florida during the events in late August. They reported that on September 3rd, the grandmother had taken their son to see a pediatrician about an upper respiratory infection. In the examination room, the boy reportedly said, quote-unquote, in a very frightened voice, "Nana, he won't have to touch my penis, will he?" When asked why he didn't want the doctor to touch his penis, the boy reportedly said it was quote-unquote secret that I quote-unquote cannot tell you. His parents arranged for the boy to see a social worker in Knoxville. After that visit, the boy told his mother that he had been to quote-unquote Mr. T's house and we were touching. He said that Miss Brenda, who had worked at the preschool, made him take off his clothes. The parents, who had never gotten permission for the boy to visit Toward's house, contacted the Stuart Police Department. The police proceeded to interview children and talk to parents. The investigation went on for months before James Toward and Brenda Williams were charged with the sexual abuse of 6 boys. As the investigation continued, other teachers were considered suspects. One lost her teaching license in what was perhaps the most dubious aspect of the case. Brenda Williams eventually pleaded guilty in June 1989 and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. I disagree with Cheit about Brenda Williams. I will talk about why that is later. But yes, that is why I'm hoping to get the information on this case. There were a pre-trial hearing in Toward's case in August 1989, lasting 8 days, including testimony from all of the children connected to the original charges and some of their parents. The state also introduced sworn statements from teenagers who claimed Toward had offered them, quote-unquote, money or gifts for sex. They described Toward's sexual behavior as, quote-unquote, sick and freakish. Prosecutors stated the intention to introduce the evidence if the defense raised Toward's character as an issue. This is relevant only to the extent that Toward's, quote-unquote, proper British demeanor led some to conclude he could not possibly commit such crimes. There are also significant circumstantial evidence concerning the claim that Toward had made and disposed of child pornography material in the months before his arrest. The 6 boys testified they were photographed by a quote-unquote movie camera and by a camera where the picture quote-unquote came right out. There's also testimony at trial from a clerk who sold Toward a Polaroid camera 2 years earlier. The clerk remembered Toward because he'd made repeated references to sex when he bought the camera. But the camera was never recovered, nor did the police find the video camera described by the children. They did find the original box for the video camera in Toward's attic. Toward claimed he never owned either one. We will never know how he could have tried to explain that fact or the evidence concerning his safety deposit box. A bank clerk testified she saw quote-unquote bundles of cash and videotapes in the safety deposit box on several occasions in 1986. Bank records showed that Toward's wife's Rosario Toward opened the box 6 days after his arrest. By the time police executed a search warrant, the box was empty. Faced with this evidence, Toward entered into a plea agreement in exchange for 27-year prison sentence, 10 years of probation, and an agreement not to prosecute his wife. He also waived the pre-sentence report, which assured that quote-unquote character evidence against him would not be part of the official record. The case became more contested in the years after his conviction. Additional civil suits were filed by families who were never involved in the criminal case. One of those lawsuits, filed 3 years later, was quote-unquote aggressively defended by an insurance company. Insurance companies, which quickly paid out as much as $1 million in settlements to some of the original complaints in the criminal case, viewed some of the later civil claims as baseless. Given the legal requirement to handle claims in quote-unquote good faith and the danger of paying enormous punitive damages if they are found to be in quote-unquote bad faith, one can reasonably assume that the evidence for some of the later claimants was weak. By the same token, however, the earlier claims were paid quickly and to the satisfaction of the plaintiffs. Toward first became part of the witch hunt narrative when his name appeared on lists prepared by Professor Mary D. Young, who never provided any support details or documentation. The False Memory Syndrome Foundation, FMSF. Okay, now this is a side from the book, but definitely look into the False Memory Syndrome Foundation when you have a chance. It's very crooked. We cannot trust anything that comes out of it. Started writing about the case in 2008 after someone they described as a quote-unquote retracting student reportedly contacted them. It's not clear why this person who has never identified himself or herself publicly would be considered a quote-unquote retractor, since by the person's own description, the family never participated in any charges or lawsuits. It is unclear, in other words, that there were any charges to retract. But this person apparently recalled being subject to hypnosis in an effort to uncover memories of abuse at the school. The FMSF also advanced the argument that they were quote-unquote suggestive interviews purporting to quote numerous snippets from an interview that is never footnoted. But none of these claims deal directly with the children who have withdrawn from the preschool before any charges were made public, or with the fact that specific items described in the original search affidavit were found in search of Toward's house, a place he said the children have never visited. This is also an aside. The psychiatrist who used hypnotic regression on this individual was one Alan Tesson, who allegedly, by one of my contacts, may have been put into the case to quote-unquote muddy the waters. But, you know, as we go through this case, as more of a, hopefully I'm able to get the documents so that I can read them and do research further on this case. I want to go now more into that. But we'll have to see, you know. There are some interesting things allegedly that was discussed by me and this informant about one Alan Tesson and his methods. But, you know, that's why, you know, I'm going to ask to get hold of the documents so that I can read them. Toward made no effort to challenge his guilty plea, so the facts of the case were not subject to any post-conviction judicial scrutiny. Instead, he offered his own version of the facts without the danger of cross-examination. Toward later claimed he did not even know he pleaded guilty to child sexual abuse, but the actual transcript of the proceeding proves otherwise. Toward declined all interview requests from journalists over the years, making an exception for a writer who befriended his wife and who recently wrote sympathetically about his allegedly false conviction. I can't remember the name of the woman who wrote that book, who claimed that she retracted her own false memory account against her own father. But reading that book, and one day now I will read the part with James Toward in that book about it, it's definitely suspect. Her interview with Toward and Toward claiming that he didn't do anything, but that's another aside. When Toward's prison sentence ended in 1999, the state petitioned to hold him under involuntary civil commitment. The petition included psychological evaluations from Alan J. Waldman, M.D., and Ada Ramirez Brower, Ph.D., both of whom concluded Toward was a pedophile who was likely to reoffend. There were extended legal proceedings and appeals, first over whether this petition violated the original plea agreement, and then over various aspects of the civil commitment law in Florida known as the Jimmy Rice Act, which itself changed over time. Toward was released in 2010 at the age of 80 with strict conditions including immediate deportation to England and an order which cannot possibly enforce for sex offender counseling. Yes, I'll go into that later. But that is the information we have about the Toward case from the Witch Hunt narrative by Rossi Chet. Again, there is no information about any information about it being connected to the finders or being connected to the pedocracy or any allegations of ritual child sexual abuse. The reason being is because the witch hunt narrative is not conspiracy. So again, at the bare minimum, as you can see, there is enough evidence that children were molested by James Tower in the Glendale Montessori case, and I don't have to say allegedly because he was convicted for molestations. He is a pedophile, and I have no sympathy for him whatsoever, and he is currently deceased. So let's read about the case of Skip Clemens in connection to the Finders, which is the Finders is my central case. It's also being investigated modern day times by Derek Brose from the Conscious Resistance, who put out a documentary about the Finders. Let's talk about the Steam Shovel Press article that had one Skip Clemens reference. Alright, I cannot increase the font on here. Okay. Skip Clements in the Finders. Skip Clements, they misspelled Skip's name, says the more he looks into the possible involvement of the U.S. Customs Service, the FBI, and the Central Intelligence Agency in an international child abuse ring, the more it resembles the Washington, D.C.-based Finders ring uncovered in 1991. In fact, he has come to suspect that it all be connected. Clements used to be with the CIA, but now he says he's with a private company in Stuart, Florida called Technology Strategic Planning, TSP, that is staffed by former intelligence employees, although unusually for a private company. Its telephone number is unlisted, and directory assistants told me that its prefix did not exist in the area code. Clements says the capacity he works in on now is not as an agent, but as a parent. Clements' own child was one of the victims of the Glendale Montessori School in Florida, which was busted in the mid-1980s, and what has only been the successful prosecution ever in the United States for ritual abuse. Contra Ken Lanning, the FBI false memory syndrome advocate who denies ritual abuse exists. One day I will refute the Lanning report on We've Read the Documents podcast. It's a complete load of horseshit. Pardon my French. Numerous other ex-CIA officials' kids were victimized in that case as well. But once the true scope of the operation became known, prosecutors' hands were already tied. James Tower, the school founder, and his secretary were sentenced to 25 and 10 years respectively in 1986, but only on condition that anyone else discovered in the operation be immune from prosecution. Ha! Imagine that. The odd plea bargain should have been a tip-off, Clements says. Beyond the 5 victims known at the time, TSB is now discovering that Glendale was connected to a ring of Montessori schools in Kentucky, which the Finders had one of those said Montessori schools, Bethea, in Bethea, Kentucky, had relations to that one, Mississippi, and elsewhere were routinely chloroformed and hypnotized children, some as young as 18 months, and shipped them as far afield as Mexico on field trips, featuring sexual abuse and full documentation on film and video. According to Clements, multiple personality disorder programming also features in the repertoire on mind control techniques. Clements claims, I don't know why this part's in blue. Clements claims TSB has been finding similar case. Tallahassee police in 1987 busted what seemed at first to be a small kiddie porn operation that they managed to trace to a warehouse in Washington, D.C. Their full-on studio was an operation involving not only child victims, but also mutilated animals and other paraphernalia indicating ritual abuse. That is correct. It was shaping up to be kind of multi-jurisdictional bust that would make the Tallahassee cops famous. The FBI and Customs were cooperating on cracking the whole thing, that is, until the CIA stepped in and squashed the bust in the story. It's incorrect about the CIA. It was the FBI that stepped in. Well, let me take that back. It was the CIA and the FCIA. I think it's the FCIA, which is a part, a broker part of the FBI that stepped in. But yeah, it's definitely something that was occurring at that time and has occurred. You know, ritual satanic abuse has occurred, you know, throughout the United States and is still going on today. That is why you haven't heard about the Finders in the mainstream press. Its tentacles went too high into federal agencies. The cover-up of the Montessori ring, Clements maintains, involves not only the Customs Service Children Protection Team, but also the agency's executive level and the highest levels of the FBI and CIA as well. But TSP's people have connections in the CIA too, and the only reason they haven't shut down as quickly as the Finders investigation. The IRS tried to crack down on TSP in April, and they've been harassed by Finders agents as well. But Clements insists the scandal reaches too far and the documentation is too extensive to deny. Even paperwork for Customs' own investigations implicates their involvement, which is true from the leaked documents of Ramon J. Martinez. That much is confirmed by a 1993 Associated Press report that the Justice Department was investigating Customs Service allegations that the Finders was not only a satanic commune, but a CIA quote-unquote front company. The CIA, according to the report, has tried to obstruct the investigation, but the CIA denies everything. The Finders in this connection identified with a computer company called Future Enterprises, which trains the CIA employees in the 1980s. Clements said TSP has been in touch with Attorney General Jared Reno, NBC, ABC, CNN, and Newsweek, and others. At Steam Shovel Press Time, he was promising that America will be reading all about it in a few weeks. Then again, that's what Clements told me in December 1993, but he isn't making it all up. I'd actually argue that Clements made none of that up. I have backed it up through my own research. I've backed my up through my own investigation. The man was telling the truth. A spokesman for one of the two congressmen cooperating in Clements' investigation, Charlie Rose of North Carolina. Charlie Rose was a part of the Council for National Policy, was big in a rap gate. He's definitely not our guy. The other is Tom Lewis of Florida. I think Tom Lewis might have been genuine. He was forced out afterwards. Of course, Mark Foley took his job, his Senate seat down there in Florida. Was it Senate? Or was it? I think it was House, actually. It was House. Mark Foley was, I think, in the House. Yes, he was the House representative during the Page scandal, not the Senate. Tom Lewis also tried to reopen the Customs Department's second unit on child pornography. So I do think Tom Lewis was genuine, from what I could tell to some degree. Of course, majority of anybody who's in the House of Representatives or in the Senate are not our guys. But compared to Charles Rose, Tom Lewis seemed to be a little bit more legit. Spokesman added, though, that it was too early to talk about quote-unquote ritual abuse or to start setting dates for any revelations. The investigation is still in the early stages, Rose's office said. But if half of what Clements says is true, there's a government-run ritual abuse ring whose discovery could shake up the corridors of power like no other scandal since Watergate. Let's hope if he's right, the CIA doesn't get to him first. Chris Roth. Okay, so you're asking yourself, why does this matter, or why am I talking about this and everything? I'm going to discuss it more. The main reason is because I have someone who's helping me with the investigation, who has been able to reach out to contacts and get me access to the state attorney of Florida's office, their records on the Glendale Montessori school case, as well as Stuart, Florida's records of the Glendale Montessori school case. I have access to those. They have to be redacted first, of the names of the children at the time, even though they're adults now. They still have to be redacted in both the state attorney records and the Stuart, Florida Police Department records. So I'm trying to raise $600 to pay for the man hours for those redactions, to pay for the photocopies, to pay for the shipment of boxes and the boxes of themselves of all this, so I can have access to these documents so that I can further research the Glendale case, further research its connection to the Finders, and actually be able to hopefully write a book about both of these and how they are interconnected with one another. So I've been quoted by both the State Attorney Office of Florida and as well as Stuart, Florida's Police Department, quoted for $600 for everything, for the redaction man hours, the photocopies, the paper, the boxes, to ship the boxes, and to give a little money to the person who is helping me for gas to cover his expenses. And anybody could definitely help me, any amount, $5, $10, or whatever. And whenever I do get this, I will go through the research with you. I will post these on the internet. I will read them out loud. I will do videos on them. We will crowdsource this investigation together. This information is not on the internet currently. I have not been able to find it, And I think this case is paramount to the pedocracy. Through the information that I know from this source and what I've been able to verify, it connects to the finders, it connects to the pedocracy of during the 1980s. James Toward was filming child pornography and selling it to the elites. He was using chloroform to gas these kids. He was transporting these kids to Mexico and molesting them. And that is all going to be in these documents, and it will be some of the first information ever told about this case. And that's why I think it's paramount to get this information, because it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist out there. And, you know, I want to tell the story. You know, I want to get justice for these children. You know, I want this story to be known. I'm tired of people calling it a witch hunt. You know, at the bare minimum, children were molested at the Glendale Montessori School, and even though James Toward was convicted, and even later on by the psychiatrist looked upon as being a pedophile and that he would reoffend, he is still to this day looked upon people who say that was all a witch hunt, that James Toward didn't do nothing, and want to denigrate the massive crimes that this man committed against these children. And it sickens me. It sickens me to my core. So that's why I want to get this research out there. I want to write, you know, when I'm writing the book of the finders, I want to include the story of Skip Clements, as well as the story of the Glendale Montessori case and how it connects, so that Skip Clements can get some justice. The man deserves some justice in this case. And that's what I want to do. So please donate if you can. If you not, just share the video, you know. And I want to get, you know, the truth out there. I believe that it's more than just the bare minimum that, you know, Rushy Chet talked about in his witch hunt narrative. I do believe that satanic ritual abuse of the highest order was occurring in these cases. A majority of them, whether it was Country Walk, whether it was McMartin Preschool, whether it was the Glendale Montessori School case, I believe it was happening, and I believe it still happens to this day. And I want to destroy the term witch hunt. When you look at back of the, or satanic panic, when you look back on these cases, I want to back it up with firm research, backing up with sound knowledge, because that is one of the biggest tools that the world order has against them and against us, is that anybody who ever mentions it, it's just like the Salem witch trials, and that you're a crazy man, that you're screaming witch, when at the bare minimum, molestation occurred, and at the grand maximum, I believe in most cases, that satanic ritual abuse was occurring in the highest order that was backed up by the pedocracy. But sorry to end on such a heavy note. I guess to end on a positive note, we have to bring this research to light so that we can stop the atrocities that are still occurring to this day. As always, if you like this video and you like my research, please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, always read the documents.